Hey everyone, so today we're unpacking something pretty incredible, a raw, handwritten artifact that gives us an unfiltered look right inside a high-pressure engineering interview. You know, normally we only ever hear about these kinds of gauntlets through vague rumors or like those super polished corporate study guides. But today, we have a literal piece of paper, a primary source that maps out the exact sequence of questions a real candidate had to survive. Let's just jump right into it.
Just take a look at this. The sheer variety of these 21 questions jotted down on this messy sheet of paper is wild. In this explainer, we're going to deconstruct exactly what this list tells us about how an interviewer's mind works. We're actually going to break down the high-level, ESE-level engineering answers that a top-tier candidate is expected to just know on the spot. By dissecting this exam, we get to see exactly how these high-stakes assessments are built to push both your deep technical knowledge and your mental agility to the absolute limit.
To make sense of this chaos, we've organized our breakdown into 5 key areas. First, inside the interview room. Second, fluid dynamics and canals. Third, construction and soil mechanics. Fourth, dams and regional geography. And finally, number 5, the unexpected curveballs.
All right, let's dive right into our first section, inside the interview room, where we decode these 21 questions.
If you step back and actually categorize this handwritten list, a really fascinating matrix starts to emerge. These questions aren't just one flavor, right? They fall into these distinct buckets. You've got deep technical engineering, you've got hyper-specific regional geography, foundational general science, and then these very probing personal or policy questions. And this just brilliantly illustrates what the candidate is up against. They have to instantly pivot between deep technical theory, geopolitical awareness, and their own personal track record. They aren't just checking if you memorized a textbook, they're checking if your brain can switch gears without stalling out under pressure.
I mean, talk about whiplash. Look at the structure here. In question 2, the candidate is grilled on the design of outlets, which is a highly specific microengineering task involving strict formulas and exact tolerances. But literally one breath before that, in question 1, they were asked to analyze the macro policy of India's prestigious IITs compared to China's advancements in AI. So 1 second, you're calculating the microengineering of water flow, and the next, you're defending geopolitical tech strategy. That is a massive cognitive leap to make in real time.
Moving on to section 2, fluid dynamics and canals, basically the science of moving water.
When you look at how these questions cluster together, you can tell the interviewer is just hammering the candidate on the practical realities of water transport. They're peppering them with questions about the physical structures needed to lift water, the design of link and feeder networks, and crucially, the actual speed of canal water flowing through concrete. They're expecting the candidate to instantly recall principles like Manning's equation for open channel flow. It tells us pretty clearly, this role demands heavy fieldwork and a deep, intuitive grasp of how water actually behaves when it hits real-world concrete infrastructure.
But, they don't just stop at the practical stuff. Look at questions 8 and 9. They ask, what is Lacey's and Kennedy's theory? And then immediately follow it up with limitations of Lacey's theory. So the key here is proving you understand the math behind the mud. At an ESE level, you'd need to explain that Lacey's theory is a regime channel theory, the idea that a channel reaches a stable state through scouring and silting, defined by a specific silt factor. But the limitation? It assumes a true regime, which almost never happens in reality, because it relies so heavily on empirical constants. The interviewer is checking to see if you actually know when a textbook theory will completely fail you in the field.
Okay, let's transition to section 3, construction and soil mechanics. It's time to build the foundation.
Throughout this whole list, there is a huge emphasis on road building, specifically WBM, or water-bound macadam road construction. Question 5 gets super specific. Why is water added in WBM construction? The real engineering answer here is that water acts as a critical lubricant. It allows the stone screenings to trickle down into the voids of the coarse aggregate, and it activates the binding properties of the stone dust via capillary action. It's all about creating that mechanically interlocked, highly dense matrix. They want the precise physical mechanics from you.
And notice how the questioning escalates. It goes from simple definitions to demanding a full procedural breakdown in question 18, procedure for construction of WBM road. The interviewer is expecting a rapid-fire technical sequence here. First, preparation of the subgrade. Second, laying the base course of coarse aggregates. Third, dry rolling. Fourth, applying screenings to fill the voids. And finally, sprinkling water and grouting. Boom. They're actively testing whether this engineer can step up and organize the logistics of a live job site.
This is where it gets incredibly tough, because they don't just want procedures. They demand pure mental visualization. In question 17, they ask for the shape of density versus moisture curve of soil. Now, remember, the candidate doesn't have a whiteboard. They have to verbally describe a downward-facing parabola, or an inverted bell shape. They have to explain that as moisture increases, dry density goes up to the optimum moisture content because of lubrication. But beyond that peak, the added water starts displacing soil particles and the density drops. It is an extremely high-level check of spatial and theoretical memory while sitting in the hot seat.
Let's shift gears to Section 4, Dams and Regional Geography, where we see how all this theory applies to the real world.
Because, look, an engineer doesn't work in a vacuum, and that's exactly why this candidate is relentlessly questioned on the specific geography of their jurisdiction. They're hit with questions about the Omkareshwar Dam, the specific command area of the Narmada River, and the river's unique features. For question 20, a truly top-tier candidate has to point out that the Narmada is incredibly unique because it's one of the few major Indian rivers flowing east to west, carving right through a rift valley. That fact alone completely changes your hydrological and dam engineering approach compared to standard delta-forming rivers.
And again, we see this intense demand for structural procedural thinking. Check out question 4. It asks the candidate to provide a basic flowchart of a dam from the reservoir all the way down to the tailrace channel. They are essentially telling the candidate, verbally draw a massive piece of infrastructure for me right now. You have to build it in their minds.
Which brings us to our final section, the unexpected curveballs. This is where they test science, tech, and your personal integrity.
So, right smack in the middle of all these insanely complex civil engineering topics between WWIM roads and fluid dynamics, the interviewer tosses in question 6. When milk is boiled, will its density increase or decrease? It's just this brilliant high school level physics curveball. Why ask it? Because under extreme pressure, candidates overcomplicate things. They might start sweating, trying to calculate thermal expansion coefficients, totally forgetting the simple fact that water evaporates out of boiling milk, which leaves the remaining fats and proteins denser. It's a trap to test your foundational reasoning and see if you can keep a cool head.
They also strategically drop the technical facade entirely to probe the candidate's motives. They start asking really pointed questions. Why do you want to join the IRMAS? Why did you leave your previous department in Lucknow? Why did you join the MP Irrigation Department? They are explicitly hunting for red flags. They want to know if you're just chasing a bigger paycheck, running away from a bad track record, or if you actually have a cohesive, honest narrative for your career.
Now, let's think back to the very first question on the page. Why IITs are lacking in deep tech innovations, in spite China is leading in this frontier through AI advancement like DeepSeek. Talk about an intimidating opener, right? Before they even touch on engineering, they test if you read the news, if you understand India's educational ecosystem, and if you grasp the global AI race. The interviewer is basically asking, are you just a human calculator, or are you an intellectual who understands the broader technological world you live in?
And we wrap up with question 21, the final item on the page. How to ensure tail-end farmer receive water from canal. The technical, ESE level answer here involves implementing a strict rotational water allocation system like the Warabandi system, along with structural enforcement to stop upstream tapping and pushing participatory irrigation management. But beyond all the technical administration, I just love this ending. It brilliantly reminds us that behind all the fluid dynamics, the stress tests, and the moisture curves, the ultimate measure of a great civil engineer is human impact. Can you actually deliver life-sustaining water to the most vulnerable person at the very end of the line? It leaves us with a great question for all of us, no matter our field. After we master all the technical skills of our trade, are we actually using them to solve the problem for the person who needs it most?